My name's John Bandler, and I hope you are all here for the same reason that I am, and that Dan is, and that Aline is, and that Emily is, and Megan, and of course Tania. I hope you're in the right meeting today. Competitive presentations and competitive speaking, a personal perspective. We'll be talking a little bit about the speakers and panelists in a moment. But first, Tania, can I call on you to do the land acknowledgement?
Thank you, John. I would be most honored. Since we all live here, it is our duty to learn about the history and traditions of this land where we gather so we can become better neighbors, residents, and caretakers. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Thank you, John, again for doing this event today. This event is part of McMaster Global, which is an annual event every year for 2 weeks, where we try to showcase international events and activities at McMaster University. And with that, John, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tania, and thanks for the invitation as well, of course. Here's something that I've used a number of times. If I'm to speak for 10 minutes, I need a week for preparation. If an hour, I am ready now. And what this is supposed to indicate that the shorter you have to speak for, the shorter the time that you're given, probably the longer it will actually take for you to prepare that. So that's the idea there. And by the way, anybody can kind of interrupt at any time with Q&A. Co-speaker Daniel Tajik will be monitoring those for me. And by all means, and you'll deliver questions as needed, and we're happy to take questions as we go through. So one of the themes that kind of occurred to me on this particular occasion is a phrase that I have used previously a couple of times, and that is show them, don't snow them. And the idea is, let the audience come away with something tangible. If you snow the audience by throwing every emoji and every image and every equation and every statistic at them and hoping that something will stick, in fact, what will happen is nothing will stick. So keep this in your heads there. Show them, don't snow them. And if you feel we are snowing you and not showing you, scream right now or scream later. So I'm John Bandler. I've been in McMaster University for over 50 years. I've won a number of awards, the most recent one being the gold medal from Professional Engineers Ontario. And I've been coaching students since 2015 in the 3-minute thesis. I've coached hundreds of students in this, and 3-minute thesis and other events as well, but mostly 3-minute thesis. And it's incredibly creative, and I really enjoy everything I'm doing and all the people I'm meeting, and I notice some of them are in the audience today. So Dan, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Aline.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Tajik. I am a PhD student at McMaster University, and I'm currently in the final year of my PhD. I got involved in the 3-minute thesis in 2017 when I participated in the International Microwave Symposium in Honolulu, and I was able to win the first place award and the People's Choice Award at that competition. I also then presented again at our university in our departmental 3-minute thesis competition, where I was fortunate enough to win first places there as well. And now I work with John a lot, working on training new candidates for 3-minute thesis competitions, as well as presenting these workshops to help other people improve their communication skills and speaking skills. I'll pass it off to Aline now.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Aline. I'm a final year PhD student at Georgia Tech, ECE, defending my thesis actually in December. And I also was part of the International Microwave Symposium IMS conference in 2019. It was in Boston, and I participated in the 3MT, and I was very lucky to win second place in Audience Choice Awards. And I'm still part of 3MT as a committee member last year, and hopefully next year I'm the, not hopefully, I am the co-chair of IMS 2022 3MT. And I'm very happy to be here today to help you hopefully make it better, basically, in terms of your communication skills. Thank you.
Thanks, Aline, and thanks for all your help over the years as well. And Megan and Emily are two guests. Both of them have done the GradFlix competition this year. We'll be coming to those presentations shortly. Megan was also a 3-minute thesis candidate a year or two ago, and in 2020, when the 3-minute thesis at McMaster was canceled, the live one at any rate. So Megan, want to say a couple of words?
Yes, thank you very much, John. So hello, everyone. My name's Megan. I'm a PhD student at McMaster in the Medical Sciences program. I study respiratory health at the Firestone Institute, and my research currently looks at a rare but fatal lung disease. I came to know John first through the 3-minute thesis competition at McMaster in 2019. From there, we also worked together on my 3MT for 2020, which, as John mentioned, unfortunately got canceled due to COVID-19. And this past year in 2021, I was also a finalist in the McMaster GradFlix competition. I'm happy to be here as well as a guest panelist, and I look forward to the webinar.
So Emily.
Yeah, hi, I'm Emily. So I am a second-year PhD student here at McMaster. I'm in the psychology department, but I do research in musical interactions between performing musicians and audience members. So I have a little bit of an interesting background. I actually did a degree in music performance before starting my PhD here in psychology. In addition to doing research, I love composing music and I love teaching piano to kids and adults. And I also met John through the GradFlix competition here at McMaster, where I was a finalist as well. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks, Megan and Emily. We'll come back to you very shortly. And a few other people I'd like to mention by name: Rachelle Ho, Erica Dow, Michelle Ogrodnik, Erin, Kiley, Anna Kovacevic, and Robin Aiello, all of whom, with all of whom I have worked in one form or another on 3-minute theses, presentations, and various other things. So special acknowledgements to them. Special shout out to Tania, Hakim, who, you know, invited me in the first place and who organized this event. And online, we have Melanie Waters and Nicole Longstaff as well, among many other people that have helped me this year and previous years along the way in this area. So we'll be, you know, indicating presentation do's and presentation don'ts. We'll contrast virtual with digital versus in person. Now, this may be a little bit confusing now and then because some of the virtual and digital in-person comments and suggestions may overlap. We'll deal with some case studies, 3MT GradFlix and U21 RISE. We'll look at images, slide composition, title formulation, and so on. So there's a lot we're going to cover, and I'm not going to kind of read every word on every slide, but if something attracts you, something I haven't mentioned that you want to ask a question about, by all means, just do that. This is a film that we made earlier this year, and interestingly, Emily and Megan played an incredible role in this film, which has now been submitted to a number of film festivals. It featured at the Hamilton Fringe Festival this year, and Emily composed some terrific original music for this. So I think we're all really proud of what we did. So we can go beyond presentations to doing other artistic stuff as well, as you can see. Okay, so I'm just going to, a few words will jump out at me here. The idea of story, the idea of articulation, the idea of being remembered, respecting the audience, and so on. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to cover or go over very, very lightly. Any particular word that jumps out at you here, Daniel, that you might want to emphasize?
Yeah, sure. I think we can dive in a little bit to first impressions. It's absolutely critical, and you'll see throughout some of the examples that we provide here that you give a very strong first impression when you introduce yourself to the audience and to the judges, depending on the competition that you're in. And that first impression can begin even before the presentation has even begun. You know, when I went and participated in the 3-minute thesis competition, I remember tripping, walking up on stage, doing a little bit of a skip. Judges see that, right? Judges see if you're sitting down, you know, joking around, not paying attention before your presentation is going to start, right? So there's a lot of aspects that are outlined here, but really ensuring that you will succeed well is making sure that that first impression that you give to the judges is as strong as possible. And so we're going to focus in on that, both through how you present yourself and through how you show visuals on your first slides and things along that line. Thanks,
Dan. Thanks. Okay, now we've all been here. We probably even subjected people to this, to slides with, you know, crammed with multiple images, tables that nobody can read, symbols that are rushing at you like a tsunami, and small graphs with illegible axes. We've been there. This is not engaging. This is something I'm trying to get away from as much as possible, but I've also been responsible for that myself. Okay, so one of the things that I'd like to emphasize here, don't run out of time. You're given 1 minute, you're given 3 minutes, you're given 5 minutes. Don't make it 1 minute plus or 3 minutes plus. Stay well under the maximum allocation. Don't sabotage your name. A lot of people do that. Even very good speakers will often sabotage their name. So you ask yourself, what did that person just say? That is something also you don't want to do. And as Dan was talking about first impressions, don't sabotage your first impression. Now, we may already have sabotaged our first impression, and what can I do? I can't correct that at this particular point. And then there are so many different media that you could be presenting. Is it physical? Is it in an auditorium? Is it one-on-one? Is it to a camera that's recording you? Is it to an off-camera interviewer? Is it to an on-camera interviewer? Is it voiceover? So, you know, and you may have questions about this. I'll be happy certainly to answer any of those. But there's so many different ways of making presentations. Please empathize with your audience. Your audience is long suffering. They're probably listening or watching all kinds of stuff, and making your audience actually want more of your presentation does take some empathy. So avoid jargon, avoid acronyms, don't get stuck in details, use metaphors, and hopefully we'll see some of those a little bit later today. And memorize your script. If you're doing a competitive presentation, you want to memorize it, but you want to memorize it so well that you don't look like a robot doing the presentation, and give the audience tangible takeaways. Okay, so a few general statements. I sort of subscribe to 120 words per minute. You'll see examples in a moment that are more than 120 words per minute. But if you want to be relaxed, fairly relaxed, 120 words per minute is more than enough. Consider story format. Try to focus on a particular person or a hero or a heroine, and you start the story with this particular person or entity, and you end with that. Avoid generalities, be specific. Make eye contact, and if I make eye contact, if I'm looking into the camera, or if there's an audience here, making eye contact at some point, or at least giving the illusion that I'm making eye contact. Anything in particular that jumps out at you here, Aline, that, you know, that you might want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the few last points, which is talking about posing, which reminds me of Dan's actually presentation that I'm looking forward for everyone here to see the starting of his presentation, how much pausing as this dramatic effect to your presentation. I think not speaking in a monotone way is going to make your presentation a lot more powerful. Although also we will see in one of the next presentations, sometimes monotone works, basically, depending on the value of what you're speaking about and the theme of the presentation. Yeah, I think that's for me now.
Good. Thanks, Aline. That's great. Okay, and then if we're doing a virtual presentation like we have now, and if it's competitive rather than what we're doing, right now I'm looking at my screen, but look into the camera. I know it's actually harder than you think. If you're used to looking at the screen all the time, looking at people, it's very hard to stop looking at the screen and look into the camera. And look away, do look away to signal thinking in real time, or to watch your canary go across the room. And don't worry about that. Just sit back, stand back from the camera to reveal hand gestures. People like to see hands. I don't see too many hands right now in the windows I'm open to me. But, and by the way, the left side of your screen, or the left side of my screen is the right side of yours. Take that into account when you're pointing and doing things like that. With video presentations, should you look at the camera or should you pretend to be looking at an off-camera interviewer or real interviewer? One of the things that I've sort of come across this year as a thought is listen to your audience. Your audience is silent, but listen to them. There's something going on in their minds. And listen to yourself inside the audience's head. What are they thinking? How is it coming across? Do you sound like it's understandable? Compose your space. Your backdrop is a prop, like it is here. So anything, I mean, let me ask Megan, for example, does something jump out here that you might want to say a couple of words? If not, don't worry.
Yes, the one that I want to comment on that's kind of closer to the bottom there is don't rush, especially in presentations where you have memorized your script, as John was speaking about. It's easy to rush through it because it's all in your head. But a word of advice that John had given me, which also ties into authenticity as well, is you want to make it look like it is the first time that you're ever saying this, because it's the audience's first time that they're ever hearing it. And along with your speaking, you want your movements to be authentic as well and not rushed as well, which will only add to your video and virtual presentations.
Great, that's great, Megan. Good stuff. Now, with video, there are some dangers with very short video presentations like GradFlix, for example. There may be too little story, too many images, irrelevant images, attention-splitting content, fake graphs, too much data or too many statistics, too many words. And then also running towards the time limit like it's a target. Sometimes you feel that some of the speakers are simply trying to push as much information as they can into the minute or the 2 minutes or the 3 minutes. That is not engaging. That's not really very engaging. And of course, when you're online doing a virtual presentation like we have now, and as we will see, some of you may see some glitches in the videos that we'll be showing, camera resolution, microphone quality, lots of problems that you need to address if you're doing an online virtual presentation. I did a fantastic interview with Adam Fortes earlier in the year. You could look this up. It's about virtual video and video do's and don'ts and delivery of scientific research to a broad audience. I've done a number of interviews with Adam, and he's really a great interviewer, and love being interviewed by him. So we'll deal with some examples now, competitive presentations for broad audiences, and we'll start with GradFlix. And there are some case studies. And in all these case studies, if you can remember this, look for metaphor, look for dramatic pauses, look for gestures, purposeful gestures. When we come to Daniel's, look for his gestures. And is it relatable? And look for storytelling as well. So let's look at a 1-minute video, Gradflix Anna Murynka, who placed first, University of Waterloo this year, mediums for self-help. So I'll play this video and then we'll talk about it a little bit on the other side. So I'm starting the video now.
Life is full of problems, and our capacity to face them is intimately tied to our mental health. So how do we do that? When we solve a problem, we draw from our past experiences and think of how we've overcome such obstacles before. These memories form our mental models, and we reference them to make predictions about the outcomes of our actions. Those predictions aren't always correct. When we experience errors, we update our mental models. Sometimes this process is hard, sometimes we get help, and other times we're on our own. My research compares how input from different mediums affects mental model updating, specifically for self-help purposes. My experiments compare mental imagery, and visual spatial imagery, determining which one leads to the greatest improvement in self-efficacy, our belief that we can get over the wall. My goal is to improve mental health resources for everyone.
Yeah, so there it is. Now we won't go through this, but this is actually the transcript of what she did. It's 148 words. To me, it's a blistering speed, but somehow she's very articulate. Those images are really, work very well for her. She's also an artist, by the way, so it helps. But one of the things I'd like to mention is her opening and closing. And we'll look at opening and closing of speeches and kind of discuss that because they're so important. Life is full of problems. My goal is to improve mental health resources for everyone. And she, of course, she opens up with mental health and she ends with mental health and about life and everyone. So it really is well bookended. Let me give you some of my personal comments on this. And I put my comments here, so I'm the one to blame for this one here. From my perspective, I really like this video. I did a double take when I first saw it. I had to watch it over and over. For me, it's highly relatable and substantive. The script is incredible. The illustration and the script of content are perfectly timed. It's just amazing how she's tied. And you might not notice this. You'd have to watch this thing over and over and kind of reverse engineer this. It makes you want, at least it did make me want to watch again. And of course, she has the lines of her script in quite large lettering at the bottom of her presentation. And it is well articulated. It seemed to me, though, fast, rather monotone. It got a little complicated for me towards the end. And of course, she's not visible, so it's a voiceover, etc. Anybody want to make any comments or offer any suggestions on this? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think in this case, being monotone is not a very big problem because, there are images all the time that are changing. And then you need to kind of focus at the same time at the images and the things being said and what is written as well. So I think in her case, just to say this was brilliant. And what she's done is simple and at the same time, just I don't know, like she did not have to use colors and crazy 3D images, right? She just went with this simple, and she's an artist, so that appeared pretty well. But in my opinion, being monotone in her case, I did not feel this thing being negative, and her being fast was not very apparent for me as well. Maybe I would because I was so taken by the simplicity of the images.
Yeah, no, for me, I just love it because it's actually related, as Dan knows, there's a relationship of the idea of mental models to my own research. So I really identified with this. Any quick word, Dan, you want to say?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I know. I just want to highlight again on those illustrations, it's really difficult to capture an idea and display it simply through a small subset of images. Usually when people go through developing their presentations, they will show these cluttered summary slides, which cover everything, all the material just on one page, which to them feels like they're capturing all their work. But it's hard for an audience member to take that in, right? You only have so much time to read through a slide. And I think this presentation is really good because the images are shown for a significant amount of time, and they're simple enough that you can appreciate the entire image very rapidly. And yet they capture that complex problem that she's trying to overcome in her research. So I really did enjoy how she was able to take those illustrations and tell her story without getting too complex or too cluttered.
Great, that's great. Thanks, Dan. I agree with everything both of you have said. So let's come to Emily Wood, who was a finalist in this year's McMaster GradFlix competition. We'll see these lines on the other side of the video as well. She opens with, "Isn't it amazing how musicians play together all at the same time, all without a single word? My goal is to understand how musicians communicate, to coordinate, to create the music we love." So I think this is well bookended in my view. Let's watch the video and then have Emily say a few words.
Isn't it amazing how musicians play together, all at the same time, all without a single word? Next time, look closely. They communicate with movements, body sway movements. In McMaster's Live Lab, we study the body sway of groups with motion capture. We create 3D models of musicians while they play, and mathematical modeling reveals how they influence each other. We basically measure nonverbal communication through body sway. I aim to answer questions like, how do ensembles use body sway to learn unfamiliar music together? And how do body sway interactions develop in children? My goal is to understand how musicians communicate to coordinate to create the music we love.
So Emily, over to you.
All right, well, I remember coming to you for the very first time with my script, and I think I had 150 words when I had first started, and right away you told me it was too many words, and I actually ended up cutting it down quite a bit. If you notice, I had quite a bit of space at the beginning and quite a bit of space at the end, and that was to make room for the music. I was kind of inspired by Anna's video from Waterloo and how she used her skills as an artist to really complement her research. So I was kind of thinking the same thing, like I want to demonstrate my research using my musical abilities. And that was kind of the vision I had for the video. And I think it was a really good thing for me to really cut down the words. I think it was down to 120 words at the end there. So there's more space for the music, more space for people to look at the images in the video and not overwhelm them too much.
Great, no, excellent. Anybody else want to jump in at all with any comment?
Yeah, sure. It was a fantastic job you did there, Emily. I really liked the video. The pauses where you're actually able to listen to the music are really nice. And those pauses are really useful because your audience needs to digest what you've said. And when you run through really rapidly a script, especially when that script has no repetition, if you lose the attention of an audience member for even a couple seconds, which happens, I'm sure people listening to this presentation now can have their mind drift a little bit. It's hard to get back into the presentation. And so providing those pauses, those chances to not have to process any language and just appreciate what they're seeing is really helpful. And I think it was really, really powerful in this video. I also like the progression of when you're explaining the motion capture, the visualization from, you guys just working and playing through your music to being all set up with the motion capture technology. And then finally, when you go into the conversation about that mathematical modeling, we're looking at some models that correspond to your specific positions in the video. So that was a really nice way of slowly easing someone into, something that could be more complex. When someone hears just off the bat mathematical model, it can be hard to appreciate, right? Like, what does that mean? But that visualization and that slow progression into it was really helpful in that stance.
Yeah, thanks very much. In fact, that sequence of scenes of us playing the music to superimposing the motion capture over it to just going to the 3D motion capture modelings, that was the very first vision I had when I heard of the GradFlix competition. So I thought of that in my head, and then I kind of based my whole video around that.
Very nice.
Yeah,
I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a very small question / comment. Was that young you at the end when you talk about children? Yeah, I think this was super special as well. Like, you did not just say it, you basically put a photo of yourself. And at least for me, it kind of made the video ×5 more special. So I think that was very smart as well.
Thanks. Yeah. Actually, yeah, that was something I thought about quite hard because, I could get videos of young fiddle players, I could get videos, but there's on YouTube, there's so many rules about, using minors in videos. So I was like, oh, I don't even want to go there. And I'm like, oh, if I just use myself, then I don't have to think about any of these issues involving minors because it's myself. And then I kind of thought, it's actually kind of more special having it as myself. It kind of completes, the whole story. I was the young musician. Now here I am, the PhD student studying music.
Yeah.
That's great. And thanks, Aline, for that great observation. I remember we talked about that, Emily, as well.
Yes.
That issue. And it was Emily's music that kind of attracted me when I was in the middle of starting off the film, that I never imagined I would have original music in my film when I first started. It just grew organically over a period of weeks and months. I can talk for hours about it, but I think I should move on, with that. But we'll come back to some of these images, by the way, that we've already addressed later on. So Megan Vierhout, she's also a finalist in this year's McMaster GradFlix competition. Here are some opening and closing lines for her. Imagine your lungs are like an elastic band. They stretch and recoil as you breathe in and out. And she closes with, my hope is that someday we can cure IPF, which she defines very well in the video, by the way, this terrible disease that robs us of something so simple as breathing. So we'll see this on the other side of the video, and we can talk a little bit about it then.
Imagine your lungs are like an elastic band. They stretch and recoil as you breathe in and out. Now, imagine your lungs are stiff, like a thick elastic band you just can't stretch. If you live with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or IPF, this may be your reality. I'm Megan Vierhout. My research explores possible causes for IPF. I study a blood cell called the monocyte, which, we believe, enters and leads to thickening of the lung tissue. I compare monocytes from IPF patients to monocytes from healthy people and aim to uncover differences in their properties. My hope is that someday, when we better understand these monocyte cells, we can cure IPF, this terrible disease that robs us of something so simple as breathing.
So notice the key words and phrases. Her name came up in appropriate locations. These are really, really important things. And of course, Emily did the same thing. There were some phrases here and there that helped in the understanding. So Megan, would you like to say a few words?
Yes. So focusing in on what John has on the slide here, so my opening and closing lines. When I was thinking about how I wanted to write these, what was going through my mind was, like IPF may not be a disease that many people know about, and what it feels like to breathe as a patient with IPF isn't something that is familiar to most people as well. So I really wanted to grab the audience's attention right away by relating the concept of this disease to something that a lot more people would be familiar with, stretching an elastic band. So it can be easy to stretch, it can be hard to stretch. And relating that to IPF and how there can be difficulties in breathing due to the elastic properties of the lung shifting. And then in terms of my closing lines, so my last few words are this terrible disease that robs us of something so simple as breathing. I feel like we take breathing for granted. It's something we do without even thinking about. So imagine having a disease where your breathing is affected. And that was kind of the impact that I wanted to leave the audience with.
Great. Anybody want to comment?
Yeah, sure. Well done, Megan. Another great video we're watching here. I think that was a really masterful use of metaphor. One of the biggest challenges when you enter these competitions is trying to explain your research in a way that's appreciable to a general audience. And it can take a long time to figure out what to use to bridge that gap, right? And so here, the use of the elastic band and the pairing of that with, a visual representation of your lungs as well was really, really good. I could immediately understand the concept that you were trying to put across to your audience. And you also utilize the space very well, the visual space in your video with, you off to the side, your image in the top corner, and then you able to sort of show the elastic band up front. So really great use of metaphor there. I also liked your movement throughout the presentation as well. Demonstrating, use of your hands, right? Interacting with an audience, even though it's through video form, right? Oftentimes people will just sit and be motionless and not interact with their body, but, you can appreciate and understand better when someone is actively in conversation with you, right? And has that movement. It shows that elastic band. Later on in your video, you walk towards the camera to highlight the impact of the phrase that you say at that specific moment. So those techniques are really good to use, and I think you utilize them really well in this presentation.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Megan, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just wanted to quickly add, when it comes to, like the movements and what I was going to do on the screen, I had planned that out with John ahead of time and kind of got his advice on it. So you want to make sure you're having deliberate movements that seem natural. So like John said, you're not seeming like a robot, but that it's coming together nicely in the end.
Right.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah. And sorry, Aline, go ahead.
No. I actually wanted to say a lot of things that Dan said. Why did you do that, Dan? But I think the case of Megan is the perfect example of someone being extremely clear. I can understand everything you said. Like even this very technical word, the way you said it, I'm like, yeah, I understand everything. So you're super clear. You did not butcher a single word, and then you're not monotone at all. And then the use of hands and going back and forth and all of that. This is extremely attractive for an audience, especially in a virtual presentation. So very well done.
Great. So we can come back to some of these thoughts later if we have time. But let's move on to 3-minute thesis. We have two examples to go through. The first one is Daniel Tajik. So he's throwing all kinds of rocks at others. So now it's time to throw rocks at Daniel. And let's watch this and look at his opening and closing lines at the end, and watch his gestures, his movements, walking back and forth, and his articulation, his pauses. Watch carefully for all those things.
X-rays cause cancer. It's a little unnerving to think about, isn't it? I'm sure most of us here have had X-ray scans done at some point in our lives, and it's obvious why. The benefits of diagnosing diseases outweighs the risks of creating cancer. Yet it begs a question. Is this really the best we can do? I think there may be a better way. Microwaves. And no, I'm not talking about the kind I cook my popcorn in. I'm talking about microwave radiation, similar in power level to the Wi-Fi signals bouncing all around us. You see, in comparison to X-rays, microwaves have a clear advantage. They're non-ionizing, which means they don't cause cancer. You may be saying to yourself, that sounds amazing, but why don't we see this in hospitals right now? And the answer to that is twofold. It either takes hours to produce an image, or the image resolution is too poor to see anything. And that is where my work steps in. My name is Daniel Tajik, and I'm developing an algorithm known as microwave holography. Microwave holography is a mathematical strategy to reconstructing 2D and 3D images. It works by performing a mapping between two things. One, an estimate of how the electromagnetic waves travel inside human tissue, and two, a blurry microwave image. By mapping these two things together, I can extract a clear image. Now, there are other imaging strategies out there that perform some kind of mapping. But in order to understand how those electromagnetic waves travel, they have to use expensive computers that take hours. I do something a little bit different. I image a blueberry. Okay, that may sound a little bit ridiculous, but hear me out. Blueberries are easy to handle, and their electrical properties very closely mimic that of tissue. By measuring the electrical properties of a blueberry, I gain an understanding of how those electromagnetic waves travel inside and around tissue. This makes my algorithm run in seconds and, incredibly, appears to improve image resolution. It seems that it's actually better to rather measure how those electromagnetic waves travel inside tissue than to try and estimate how they travel using expensive computers. My goal is to bring microwave holography to clinical use in the next 5 years. So hopefully, the next time you go to get a scan done, instead of thinking, is this going to give me cancer? You're thinking, what smells like popcorn? Thank you.
Okay, so we'll look at his opening and closing lines, and we'll get Dan to do some comments. But before we do that, I wrote in all these stage directions, how he opens, how he closes, any walking. For example, if you look down near the end of this, turns, walks stage right with emphatic gestures with both arms. So a lot of this is staged, but it feels natural. And to me, really three powerful opening words: X-rays cause cancer. And look at the pauses, all those meaningful pauses. And we'll come back to that later on. So Dan, we will be coming back to you later on in a variety of issues. So, if I'll just mention the closing lines. And again, look at the stepping forward. My goal, and he steps forward. And notice towards the end, smiles, slight bow, thank you, steps back. Now, those are not things that you would actually really take in explicitly. You just don't normally reverse engineer this, but you see it as a whole. And if you go through the video over and over, you see he stumbles over his words a couple of times. But in real time, in an in-person presentation, nobody really notices that. It's only noticeable in a video later on. So Dan, I've said enough. Would you like to say a few words about your presentation?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of this presentation was very specifically selected for its use in the presentation, right? So my pacing back and forth, my stepping forward and back, these are all sort of planned moments so that I could highlight specific parts of my presentation. I did it to add impact, right? So that the phrases I was saying would have more value. Or if I wanted to, return to my original state, I would step back away and then go into an explanation of some other material. The other thing to note is that throughout the presentation, I try to use repetition, and I try to answer the questions that the audience was having as I was going through the presentation. So one, I want to make sure that if your attention leaves my presentation for a short while, because I'm repeating myself, you can get back to the presentation and still understand what I'm saying. And two, I wanted to make sure that when I'm giving my presentation, I am as I'm thinking as if I'm in the audience, right? I want to know when I say something dramatic, what the audience would think, right? Because if I just start saying amazing, wonderful things, the natural thought process of the audience is, well, that sounds too amazing, right? Like I don't see it, it's not used anywhere. And if I start saying, you know, horrible, sad things, the audience thinks the opposite direction, right? So you have to find that balance and try to cut your audience off before they can think that question, right? It's also really satisfying for the audience when you answer their question without them having to even ask it. And I think this sort of ties into something that John said earlier in this presentation on, video presentations. When you're trying to interact with your audience, one of the ways you can do that is set yourself up so that your audience asks a question that you can answer without even having to see their reactions, right? So if you can create or craft a script that allows you to do that, it'll really enable you to more closely interact with your audience, even though it's through a visual media. Or video media.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Anyone else want to jump in with a comment or two? Or we'll come back to Dan in a couple of ways later on. Okay, if not, let's go on to Aline Ead's video. And of course, that was in person in 2017. This is in 2019. And let's watch the video. And again, look for purposeful gestures, look for metaphor, look for movement. And by the way, the slide, her slide and Dan's slide were actually up on their left side. So that's where it was. The camera didn't capture those, the actual slide that was in the room. Okay, so let me play this video.
Hi everyone, I am Aline from the Georgia Institute of Technology, and this is Lucy, the tarantula from the Amazon rainforest. Now, why have I asked Lucy to join us today? Well, I've developed a system that Lucy is standing next to, a system which very much looks like her. Lucy has 6 eyes. My design has 6 eyes. Lucy can climb walls, dwell on planar or curved surfaces. Likewise, my flexible system sticks to any material and wraps around any surface. And strangely enough, Lucy and my system look very much alike, a body surrounded by legs. Imagine a technology that will help preserve our environment, and Lucy's. Every electronic device around us needs power to function. Remember those terrible times when your phone, your watch, your earbuds were on the brink of death. Now imagine having to look after billions of devices. For example, sensors. By 2020, you'll be surrounded by them. That's the promise of the Internet of Things. Billions of devices means billions of batteries being continuously replaced, continuously discarded at a huge cost to Lucy's environment. But what if we could actually harvest the wireless energy that is all around us and convert it to usable DC power to actually drive our devices? Yes, that's the 5G wireless power grid surrounding us. Or web, that's for you, Lucy. My work aims at designing an energy harvesting system based on a lens. A lens not made out of glass or plastic, but out of planar metal. Around this lens, we have 2 major components: antennas to scavenge the wireless energy, and on the other side, circuits to convert this energy to usable DC power. But why the lens? Well, to harvest enough power, you need a big enough system. At 5G frequencies, a large system can only receive power from a narrow field of view. The lens, just like Lucy with her 6 eyes, can make our system look in 6 different directions all at the same time. That's not all. Having the lens on board allows us to harvest 21 times more power compared to a standard system. Thanks to this, we can do away with batteries and their chemical waste. This will make the environment happier, our environment and Lucy's. Thank you.
So, pardon my cough. So again, I've done the same thing with Aline, excuse me, as with Daniel. Aline, can you maybe take over on this?
Yeah, of course. So just a few quick notes. Of course, same to Daniel, this took a very long time for me to try to figure out what would be the best metaphor. What do I want to resemble my design to? Should I think of its impact, how it looks really, and find something that resembles to that? So we never say this is easy, this is hard. And but the good thing about this is that I carried it for every single presentation I've done so far in my entire PhD. So it's not like when I'm presenting a poster in a technical conference, I tell them this is Lucy, but now I have the strength and the capability to compare this system to something and understand how it works. So in terms of that, yeah, I did use all the points that make my presentation stronger in terms of not being monotone, in terms of using metaphors, in terms of being clear, opening my hands, smiling to people, interacting with people in the audience by telling them your phone, your AirPods, making those very small jokes, posing, being sad. When I was saying, talking about batteries and talking about chemical waste, I really felt sad. Like I remember how I felt when I was presenting, and I took a few steps backward to even make it even more dramatic. But the good thing is that I practiced so much so that it did not look like I'm acting. I practiced at home when I was doing things on the side. I'm just listening the speech so that I got so used to it that nothing could stop me from saying it, nothing in the audience. So yeah, so that's in terms of the opening, I think, and asking question, because having Lucy was very shocking. So I had to ask why did I ask Lucy to join me today?
Yeah.
And then I brought Lucy back for the ending. Very important thing whenever you bring a story and make it personal, which in my opinion is very, very important, to make your story very personal and not just talk about everyone. Choosing one element or one person sometimes is very, very important, and not leaving the people thinking about this Lucy that you never brought back in your entire speech. I brought it back in the middle several times, and then closing the loop with Lucy and the environment is very important.
That's great. Thanks so much, Aline. Anybody want to jump in with a comment? Any comments? Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, playing around with my mute button there. Yeah, again, another like really fantastic use of metaphor. I think the audience really loved Lucy at that presentation and really connected with it. And you know, I know we've spoken about this before, Aline, but finding that metaphor is really challenging, right? Finding that connection can be really tough, and so, you know, these presentations, in order to craft them, there's months of effort that go into it, and sometimes for very simple things. The other thing to note is also practice. Practicing for these in-person presentations can be pretty tricky, because you don't want to always practice in the same environment. If you get too familiar with the same environment, then when you enter the actual stage where you're going to present, it's going to feel unfamiliar, and it can, you know, destabilize you, right? So making sure that you practice not only in a comfortable place, but in every place you can. I know that when I was practicing my presentation, I would sometimes do some jumping jacks to get my heart rate up, because I know that when I step on stage, I'm panicking, right? my heart's racing. So to emulate that, you know, I do something that actually got my heart rate up, and then I try to go through my presentation, and just getting familiar with that feeling was really helpful. So, you know, practice makes perfect is truly something that goes on in these presentations.
Boy, I learned something new every time we do this, Dan. I didn't know you did jumping jacks. At least I didn't internalize that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in with a comment?
Sure, I'll jump in. I guess my comment is kind of about both of your presentations, to be honest. And I just want to go back to the idea of gesture again. And I thought I would comment on this because this is actually a part of my research. I research gesture and I research nonverbal communication. There's a huge literature out there that shows that gestures are actually important for us actually forming the thoughts that we are going to say in our head. If you block people's ability to gesture, you block their ability to think of what they say. And there's many studies showing this, which I think is really interesting because it helps you seem authentic. It makes it seem like you're forming these thoughts in your head just in the moment. If you're not gesturing, that kind of, indicates that you're really performing something memorized and you don't seem as authentic. So I just thought I would relate that a little bit to the research in the field and just how important these gestures are. They seem so minuscule, but they really aren't.
Yeah, they're really, really important. Yeah, thanks for that observation, Emily. And again, when we later on, we can come back to this subject in our kind of final discussion. So let me now play a little bit of Lianna Genovese's 5-minute video. She won a competition here at McMaster University and then did the international U-Rise competition again and won in 2020 the winner most innovative award, and you see it's really very, very well justified, and it's more of a pitch for a product rather than a thesis itself, because she was, I believe, a first-year student in biomedical engineering when she did this, but one of the things I want to draw your attention to, she starts off with, "Hi, my name is Lianna Genovese, and I'm a biomedical and mechanical engineering student at McMaster University. I'm also the CEO and founder of Imaginable Solutions. My motivation began with a woman." And that to me is the beginning of the story. The woman is kind of, in a way, the person that's going to lead us through to the end. And that's one of the things that I think made this thing work as well as the fact that it's an incredible invention. So I'll play a few minutes of this, then I'll move over towards the end, and we'll see that, since we're focusing mostly on the beginning and the end.
Hi, my name is Lianna Genovese, and I am a third-year biomedical and mechanical engineering student at McMaster University. I am also the CEO and founder of Imaginable Solutions. My motivation began with a woman with dystonia, a neurological movement disorder in which she experiences frequent muscle contractions. She was unable to perform simple day-to-day activities, and one of those activities being painting, something that she loved to do. However, because of her condition, she was unable to do so because she experienced the curling of her forefinger and thumb and wasn't able to hold onto the paintbrush correctly. I had noticed a similar pattern with other individuals suffering with limited fine motor skills of various medical conditions, including ALS, Huntington's disease, and even people recovering from spinal cord injuries and strokes. They all cannot hold onto simple utensils and perform these day-to-day activities.
So I'm going to jump forward here.
Further ado, I would like to introduce you to Guided Hands.
So notice how it ends with her and the woman. I mean, to me, in a way, it's sort of perfectly bookended. It's 5 minutes long, so there's quite a bit of detail in between, and there's a lot of showing of what her invention can do, and so on. As I say, it probably hit the 5 minute mark. Anyone want to jump in with any comments or thoughts?
I can jump in. So something that I noticed right away was the music, and how the music was started at a point where it was appropriate for that tone to be introduced in the video. And I think that's something important when doing like filmed presentations or video presentations that aren't live, to be very conscious of the tone that you're conveying. And as Aline previously mentioned, it's okay to be a bit monotone sometimes when you're talking about something that may be more serious or more suiting to that tone. And you don't want to have conflicting tones with the words that you're saying and what you're conveying on the screen and the background music. So I just noticed that she introduced the music at the perfect timing, which was demonstrating her invention and the great things that it does, and the hope that it brings as well.
Thanks, Megan. And by the way, notice that for the first 3.5 minutes or so, she is literally sitting in a couch facing the camera, and yet she's clearly engaging, has a good story to tell, a powerful story, and the edits are jump cuts because she's literally looking at the same camera the whole time. So every now and then there's a little bit of a jump cut edit. But to me, it's amazing what you can do, literally even sitting in a couch, if you can present your case. So anyone else want to jump in with a few comments?
Yeah, sure. One of the things I liked about that presentation is how clear and concise she was with her phrasing. Every word was enunciated really clearly. So it was really easy to keep track of her presentation, follow it along. And I also think she did a good job of avoiding talking down to her audience. Sometimes when we simplify our work, our thesis work or whatever we're trying to present, it can come across in a way that, an audience member won't appreciate, right? So we need to make sure when we're crafting these presentations that we understand the phrasing and the nomenclature that we use in our work needs to be explained well, but we don't need to go down to a level where it becomes condescending trying to explain it, right? So she did a very great job of making sure that she was talking about the specific ailments that were impairing people and how exactly her work was going to benefit that.
Yeah, and I spoke to her. She's won all kinds of competitions with this invention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Manufacturer. This is being manufactured as we speak, so it's really a very successful startup operation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move forward. We can come back to ideas relating to that in a moment, as you'll see. Now, if you have a live audience, to some extent, obviously we have live audiences, even though we're virtual. And I think Dan mentioned the idea of stumbling onto the stage. They may be, so the judges, if this is a live presentation, the judges might even be looking at you. They can see you walking over to the stage. By the time you get there, they may have formed an opinion about you before you've even spoken. And of course, they may not like your slide. And judges will absorb audience reaction. Again, in a virtual environment, it's difficult to have an audience reaction. And of course, they'll consider relative performance. So Dan, I want to put you on the spot a little bit here, but how important is dress? And notice he's taking a look at himself there, and the length of the tie is very important. Donald Trump should get some advice from Dan about how long the ties should be. And look at the color coordination. We'll talk about that in a moment. And by the way, look at the sleeves. I never noticed that. I did not notice that until years later, about the sleeves being rolled up and down. Something that I just didn't take that in before.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on minutia, like little details that I thought may have some impact, because I wanted, you know, there's always this talk about what is, you know, if someone has an X factor, you just see the presentation, you just get this feeling, you don't know what it is, but you just like that presentation. To me, it's like mastering all these little things, combining all these tiny things together so that, you know, there's really no flaw that someone can see in what you're doing. Yeah, before my presentation, I really wanted to see if my sleeves were would be better rolled up or down. There you go. My sleeves are rolled up.
And there he is in action. And by the way, look at the color coordination. By the way, the blueberry is blue. That tie is blue. The blueberry is blue. The IEEE logo is blue. Color coordination doesn't get much better than that. So hats, you know, my hat goes off to you. There's a lot of things I didn't take into account at that time. And by the way, let's look at core images for a moment. You know, to me, Anna Murynka's core image is this model, this idealized model in her head, as you can see in that bubble, and then she comes across reality. There's the model, and then there's the reality. To me, this and those predictions aren't always correct. If she were doing a 3-minute thesis, this could be her slide, from my perspective. Here might be Lianna's core image. This is one possible core image. This is another possible core image. There are, of course, many, but this would also work. For Emily, and we'll let Emily have a word there, I went through the video and I thought to myself, you know, if I were thinking about a one single static slide, how about this? That kind of encapsulates everything. What do you think, Emily?
Yeah, well, like I said, the very first vision I had when thinking about graphics was this idea of seeing musicians, imposing the motion capture over, going to that 3D model. So you're kind of isolating right to that initial vision I had for the video. So I'd say this works. You're kind of like, oh, what are those dots over top of the musician? What's going on here? Could potentially capture some interest there.
Right. Right. And then here's Megan's. Again, this is, you know, I kind of put this stuff together here. To me, this is Megan's core image. It kind of, if you think about it, it really captures everything that she said. And in a 3-minute thesis or a single slide, if you had a single slide, why not have a person? Why not have the speaker in there? The speaker, the actual person presenting, could be in the slide. How about that? It makes it a little bit more attention may be focused because there's a picture of a person there. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not opposed to that idea at all, because you will be the one that's delivering the speech. This can function as a core image because it's tying together my metaphor with the actual concept that I'm talking about. So you have both the thick elastic band and you have the lungs. So it encompasses the main points that the talk starts with.
Yeah, absolutely. And then coming back to Daniel's famous blueberry, and as I mentioned, it matches his tie as well. Good, great color. The idea of a blueberry, that's mystery. Now remember, the audience will see this the entire time. And he is talking about X-rays causing cancer, and he's showing a picture of blueberry. And the audience is thinking, is this guy for real? Is this serious stuff? This is serious stuff that he's talking about. But then it so happens that there's a real tangible, what is the word, convergence between the slide and the speech at some point throughout. So to me, that's also part of why this worked. Anyone want to jump in with any comment on anything I've handled so far? You kind of agree with this? We can come to the tarantula. There it is. You know, you see it a little larger. Again, that's great. Tarantula's view, Lucy. So if you remember nothing about Aline's presentation is about chemical waste and Lucy, you know, you conflate the two things, chemical waste and Lucy.
Yeah, just to say something here, the power of adding Lucy. I've been remembered for the next conference, IMS conference, as the Lucy girl. People would come and meet me and be like, are you the Lucy girl? Yeah, I mean, I am Aline, but yes, I am the Lucy girl.
Well, there you are. Lucy's more famous than you. Yeah, so that's great stuff. So let's look at a few titles. We haven't talked much about titles. I like, these are titles that I like, and you can kind of take them in very quickly. For example, Fighting Obesity with Fat. I mean, you know, there's a sniffing out weapons with microwaves. So there's a lot of metaphor. These titles are not, well, partly serious and of course partly metaphorical. So the titles are important. Opening lines, and let's look at Daniel's opening line at the very, very bottom. I wrote this myself. I said, the more a person undergoes X-ray scans, the greater the risk they will develop cancer. Now, he could have started like this. This is perfectly reasonable. It's a nice sentence. It basically means the same thing. And a lot of speeches may indeed begin like this. But instead, he started the way he did. X-rays cause cancer. So opening lines, you should really study those opening lines. Again, look at the top one here. It is not only hard to contemplate the complete wastage of every drop of precipitation that impacts the Earth's surface, it is also implausible, okay? Factual statement. Imagine if all the rain was wasted. That doesn't sound right. Two different ways of imagining this. So, and the closing lines, bringing your story to a close. As well, sorry, bring your story full circle. And we've seen examples of presentations that did indeed bring the story full circle. Okay, final words before we kind of engage in a free discussion in the minutes that we have remaining. Be clear, avoid mind-twisting logic, keep sentences short and punchy, speak words in a clean, crisp, clear way. I know I could have said cleanly, crisply, and clearly, but I said clean, crisp, clear, because clean, crisp, clear sounds cleaner than clean, I don't know, whatever. Don't worry about it. Be yourself, be authentic, don't act, don't pretend, and kill your fake speech mode. Most of us, including me, have this tendency, as soon as we are on stage, we suddenly go into speech mode. And of course, that also sounds a little fake. Be empathetic towards the audience, be conversational, be in the moment. If your canary is just about to be eaten by your cat, don't ignore it. It's there happening in front of you. Be in the moment. So with that, I'll say thank you. We sort of come and finished in a comfortable time. And listen, I don't think we've had too many questions there, Dan. So anything, I do see some things in the chat box, but I'm not sure if they are relevant.
Yeah, there haven't been too many questions, so I'll, you know, to the attendees, if you guys would like to ask us some questions, please feel free to post in the chat or use the Q&A pop-up to ask your question and we can answer it here. There was one comment before on the presentation with the mental modeling. In that video, you know, there's a visualization of VR and you know, video and audio being ways that you can update your mental model. And you know, VR wasn't actually defined in that presentation, and that's actually something you should definitely watch out for. The use of acronyms in a presentation can be really tricky. If you start using them, you have to make sure you define them. I think Megan did a great job using her acronym because it is well defined, right? So they can be used. You just have to make sure you're really clear when you're introducing them, and you avoid introducing too many, because as soon as you introduce too many, then you know, you lose track of everything. So
any final words from our guests or panelists or speakers?
So there's a question in the chat. Emily touched on using others in the video. Is there a standard form to have them sign that they consent to be in the video?
Standard form to be in which video? You mean in
I guess
Well,
in this
Emily?
case, it would be like a GradFlix video or one of these videos for a presentation. Yeah, that's a great question. I wondered that myself, and I had no idea what the answer was. So I did have a guest in my video. I had my roommate, Konrad Swierczek, on the bass playing with me in my video. Now I just got verbal consent from him to be in that video, and you know, he's one of my very good friends, so I guess that works. But I guess if it's more someone you're not familiar with, or you might want to actually look into forms, I suppose, for using their image in your videos, but I'm not too sure about anything beyond that.
Yeah, and again, if you're using subjects in a scientific study involving humans, you obviously have to get written consent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a wide spectrum. There's a wide spectrum of how much formal or informal consent you need.
Right.
Yeah. So there are like examples such as Shutterstock or other places where you get those professional photos. From there, obviously, you can use whatever you want. The photos are there to be used. But I'm assuming if you just take any photo off the internet that is not placed on a professional website, you might get into trouble for using it in your slides and getting it online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Emily.
Sorry. Yeah, and if you do use someone in your video, you might consider acknowledging them at the end. So I did acknowledge Konrad at the end of my video there.
Yeah, which actually leads me to think, you know, imagine both Emily and Megan did 1-minute videos and still had the time for a few seconds of acknowledgement. So the idea that you have to cram everything in, you don't have any space to mention people that have worked with you isn't really true. So, and particularly in a pre-recorded video. We've really unearthed some interesting new. I'm looking forward to reviewing the recording of this.
There's another question here.
Yeah.
How can we exercise to learn how to link an abstract research work to a meaningful metaphor for audiences? Where should we start? Can we use real world appliances or applications for our research? It's really hard. It's really hard to try to find those metaphors. For me, this is physically what I was using with this blueberry. So it was a little bit more straightforward to use that to explain my work. But I guess Aline can probably talk more on this. What was the process like finding Lucy and using her in your presentation?
Yeah, I think there are multiple ways to find this metaphor. Again, as I said, it could be you looking at the device as physically how it looks and trying to link its physical appearance to something, which is what I did. But another thing I did is I thought about the application of my work. What's the impact? And once I thought, because I was thinking about a disco ball, and you can't imagine the amount of ideas I had when I thought about my system that is a lens. But then the reason I chose the tarantula is that it links the shape and the impact, which is the environment. Lucy lives in the environment. Lucy would suffer from the chemical waste. So I think thinking about where your research will be used, what's the impact, what problem are you solving, its physical appearance, where would it be placed? I think when you think about so many different aspects of your research, you will find a relationship somehow that would relate to a lot of people and make them be captured by your talk, basically. At least that's my experience.
Aline, I never asked you this question before, but did you create the slide and the idea of Lucy before you wrote the script?
Yeah. I sat for 3-4 hours with, I'm very thankful for my two colleagues who sat with me at the time. And we just started, I think the physical appearance of my system was the lead there. It looks like something, but then after all the ideas we threw at each other, we decided on tarantula because again, it makes us the impact and the shape at the same time. It's much stronger than just a shape like something.
Well, you know, I advocate if there's a single core image, I advise people to work on that single core image first, because that can inform your entire story, your entire speech. And I think Emily touched on this in particular as well. Daniel's core image is very powerful, but there's a little more mystery in Daniel's. It's a little more obvious in yours, Aline, in a way. But Daniel's is just totally mystifying. Even to a specialist, they would wonder, well, why am I watching this? So his mystery was heightened significantly. And yeah, work on an image first, some kind of a core image, something that will tell your story. And of course, in Lianna's story, it's really the story of the woman. And then that's the story, but then the image is of the woman performing certain tasks. I mean, to me, that's the core image. You see the hand movements. So that's.
We have another question from Tania. She said that she liked Daniel's example of doing jumping jacks to combat nerves. So do you have any other examples that we could use? I can talk about my experience. Again, I would say I always like to be very honest. 3MT in person, maybe virtual as well, is a very difficult experience. Practice. So I was extremely nervous before the competition. And one way that helped me is a bit of a crazy way, but it worked. I came out of the conference center and I screamed outside the first sentence of my script. I said, "Hi everyone, I'm Aline from Georgia Institute of Technology." And I was literally screaming, and people next to me are like, "She's crazy." And I hope the same people were not in the room during the competition, but it helped me a lot, just making that statement very loud and then saying it almost the same way in the competition, tiny bit in a lower volume, but just with the same confidence.
Megan and Emily, how do you psych up for this kind of thing? Well, if it's a video, it's a little bit different, but
it's a bit different. Oh, sorry, Megan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess if you're doing a video and you're just doing a voiceover and you're not appearing in it, you might be tempted to not memorize your script. You might be tempted to, read off it for a voiceover. But I think, memorizing that script really lets you kind of frees you up for gestures. And even though if you're doing a voiceover and people can't see your gestures, I think that they really can still hear it in your voice, whether or not you're really embodying what you're saying. So I memorized my 1 minute script, and I went around and I would just say it to people. I'd say, "Hey, do you want to hear about my research?" And I said it to multiple people. And I mean, that really helped me for the actual day of filming when I was there in the lab. And when I filmed it, I found that really helped me prepare. And, even though I didn't have like a live audience there, it still helped quite a bit.
That's great. Yeah, Megan, yeah.
I completely echo what everybody has said so far regarding preparation. Preparation is definitely key to combat nerves. You feel prepared, that speech is almost in your long-term memory. I'm speaking more so of my live 3MT experience where, you have one shot at the presentation. I think Daniel touched upon this before, but differences in where you're actually giving the talk can throw you off a little bit. So I did the same thing that Daniel recommended. You practice in different locations, like I'd rehearse it in the lab, I'd rehearse it at home. And then even prior to the 3MT competition, which was in the auditorium in L.R. Wilson Hall, I made sure to try to get in there a little bit early and just stand on stage and see what it felt like, even if I didn't have time to fully practice my speech there, just to know what it felt like to stand on stage, have the view that was going to be there when I actually presented in front of me. And yeah, the more you get used to presenting in different environments, the more easy you'll be able to adapt when you actually get up on stage to give your talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I know that was something I also did when we got to the competition room, standing up on stage and just going through your lines. It's really helpful because it all of a sudden becomes familiar. A couple other things that I would do to practice, I would try to find people who hadn't heard it before and were hearing it for the first time. So you have to preserve some people so that you can show them this presentation as you go through your practicing and your building of the presentation, because what happens is you bias the people who've already seen it once, twice, or 3 times, right? So make sure that you're able to present it to new people so that you can get that first impression, that first reaction, because that's really valuable versus someone who's heard it, 4, 5, 6 times. You don't necessarily get the same feedback that you want to get. Another exercise I like to do when I was practicing was say the presentation or run through the script as fast as possible. So just speed through it. Don't hesitate. Just say every line. You're not pausing or anything. No one's listening to you. You just say it as fast as possible. And I think that really enforces it in your memory, because you don't have time to think, what is the next line? You have to know the next line because you're screaming it out in rapid speed, right? So that's another exercise that I used in order to help me prepare for this.
So great. So listen, we should put this show on the road. I mean, this is incredible. This is a really incredible advice. I must say we've covered a lot of topics today, and I think in a minute or so, we should probably be bringing this to a close. Does anybody have a burning comment they want to make? No burning comments. We've exhausted ourselves. There's something in the Q&A. I'm not sure what it's saying.
I believe we've answered that here.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Abstract research. Yeah, a lot of people are afraid of abstract work. Actually, Daniel's is very abstract by, in terms of what someone else might think about. Microwave holography is not something that is easy to understand. And if you ever go over that presentation again, notice how he uses microwave holography, not in a way that forces you to try to understand it, but he uses it more as a label. He ends one sentence with microwave holography, the next sentence begins microwave holography. So that's there are certain devices of redundancy, of context that you can use to make even the most abstract concept be meaningful, let's say.
Right. Yeah, no, I know that actually took me a long time to figure out, because what I really wanted to do, I wanted to make sure that my presentation captured some of the mathematical work that I was doing, but I can't show an equation, right? I can't talk about numbers or variables or anything like that, right? Because it's too complex to explain in 3 minutes. So I was trying to find a way, how do I describe these certain portions of my equation in a way that is appreciable? And so that's where I sort of came up with this idea of mapping, right? And this hand gesture that I use, it really does, in my mind, capture, these 2 halves of my equation that I'm trying to correlate together in order to extract a cleaner image. So finding those little metaphors, those little things to explain your work can be challenging. It involves a lot of brainstorming and just a lot of trying different things out. Usually the first thing you try isn't going to work, but you just have to be persistent, and eventually you'll find something that does allow you to represent something that's really technical or mathematical in a way that's appreciable to an audience.
Well, thanks, everybody. I think we've covered everything that I have ever imagined we could possibly cover today. So listen, thank you, audience, for your questions. Thank you, Aline, Dan, Emily, and of course, Megan, who had a prior appointment. So really glad you were all here. So I guess we can bring this to an end. Sorry to see you go, but I think all things have to come to an end, and we've just about finished on time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.